So let's begin. First up, I'd like to welcome Martijn Langstraat, Benelux Senior Director of Sales, Amadeus Hospitality, to present the data to help you plan for the future and maximize your revenue in 2021. Over to you, Martijn.
Thank you, Mieke, for the kind introduction. It is great to be here today, and thank you all for joining. I hope you are keeping well in the current lockdown situation, and that this event today will be very inspiring and a way to connect together. So in the next 20 to 25 minutes that I have with you to spend, I think this time will be a great one to kick off basically what is going to be discussed by the other presenters and speakers later on in the event. So if we go to the next slide, we can see something around data, and that's what we're going to look at today. So it will be the next 20 to 25 minutes. We will look at the impact of COVID on our hospitality industry. And although a lot of these things will probably be familiar to you, it is super important in these times to use data as your guideline as to what is real and what is not real. There are so many things going on in this world today that are out of the ordinary, things that we have not seen happening at all. At least I have not, and so many with me. And it is really important to understand what is the real impact on our hotel industry in the world, what is relevant for us to take away and learn from, what are real trends, and what is maybe just something that is a gossip go around and that is a rumor. So with Amadeus, and that's the great thing in working for a leading technology provider like Amadeus is, we have a great, huge lot of data available to us. We have a very strong footprint in the airline industry, as well as in the hotel industry and the hospitality industry in general. And what was very clear to us from the beginning is that we should bundle all that in the beginning, beginning of the pandemic, when this first started to outline the results, the negative results, at the end of 2019, when we saw it impacted our airline business in the Far East, and our hotel business there as well, is that we should use that data to build a recovery insights tool to be able to understand what is happening, to strategize ourselves, but also to help our partners, to help our clients and hotels in order to work through this pandemic that is now over us. So what I'd like to do today is look at these sets of data and see how it is impacting us at a global scale, but also more at a national level if we look at Europe and the countries therein. And then visualize. We will not have the time nor have the ability to show that detailed data, but visualize that what we will be looking at on a global level and more national level can also be applied to your actual competitive set and your local market. So that is something that is going to be interesting. So we're going to take away some learnings from the past, and we're going to look at the future to see if we can actually already spot some trends of recovery. So before we move on to the next slide, I just want to make clear where we are getting our data from. So we are very rich on data within the Amadeus as a company. And one of the platforms that we have at our fingertips is Demand 360, which is looking at occupancy levels within the hotels worldwide, and there's tens of thousands of hotels that are providing their data on a daily basis directly from their PMS, so it's real on the books data. And it's looking back 365 days in history, and it's looking into the future also 365 days out. The great thing about it is that we are able to look at different segments and different channels that the bookings are coming in from. Revenue strategy is the other data source that we're using, which is pretty much focused around rates. And the other data source that we are going to look at today is taken from the airline booking data, and that is coming from our Amadeus GDS. So let's take it away for the first slide after this one. And this is, and I hope that you can see the numbers a little bit, and even though you will not be able maybe to see the specific numbers, I think the trends that we can see here and what's happening is quite interesting to take away. So if we look for the Netherlands at the airline and hotel net reservations, there is some things that jump out at us. And when we look at net reservations, this means the difference between the actual new reservations that have come in for either the airline industry or for the hotel reservations, and the cancellations. So this makes up for the net booking. So everything to the right of our axis is positive because it means that we're getting more new reservations than actual cancellations, and everything to the left is not so good at all. Of course, if we look 1 year back, and this is no surprise, and we've seen this many times before, we were all at the same time this last year, we were all expecting a fantastic rockstar year with many great events here in the Netherlands that would take us to an all-time high. But at the end of February, when we saw the effects of decreased flights coming from China and the Far East, we already saw that the net reservations were on the decline, and obviously when springtime came in March, this was hitting us all really hard, and taking everything for all hotels, but also for the airlines, completely, all reservations that were there completely out of the books. Now, interestingly enough, and that will be something that is nice for you to take away as a learning and something to take into consideration as we move into our next springtime, where we hopefully will be able to see a market again that we can welcome to our hotels, is that the green, being the hotel reservations, the green is recovering quicker than the airline industry when we look at springtime of last year, meaning that, of course, the domestic travel, which doesn't require any airlines here in the Netherlands, was picking up earlier than the airline industry itself, and that is something, especially for those hotels that are that have seen great results also on the domestic market, should take a learning of and be aware of and see if that's going to be a trend again, and something that we see happening in this year. And then going up, we do see that there's more positive reservations than cancellations, which makes sense because with the enormous total cancellation that we had and everything out of the books, everything that came after that must have been positive. We can follow the different lockdowns basically throughout Europe and what effect it had on our airline industry as well as our hotel reservations. So what does this mean for our occupancy levels? And we can see that in the next slide. If we look at the worldwide and regional hotel occupancy, and what we're looking at now is last year, January, up to basically the whole of 2021, which is a huge period, but it's more to focus on some trends that we see happening here. Obviously, beginning of last year was an all-time high with a big drop that we've seen many times. But then as we see the colored lines, I'm not sure if you can read it all clearly there where you are, but the yellow line being China obviously hit first. Now, what is interesting to see here is that they were able to recover very quickly, and their travel and their hotel occupancies even went up to a 61% average in the second half of last year. Obviously, now in the beginning of the year, with the whole world going into some kind of a lockdown again, we see that the future is not so bright, but it does show, and that's something that I've taken away from all of 2020, if I look at the data for hotel occupancies, is that there is huge resilience and a lot of strength and energy in almost every nation across the world to want to travel. And that is something which I believe is very promising now we're moving into 2021. And even though, as we can see from the numbers, January and the beginning of the year is not so positive due to the many lockdowns that are still there, we do see an upward trend, for example, for Europe being the red line there. Not so much in this quarter, but as of the second quarter, we do see some careful recovery where we even up with, for example, North America, which I believe is something to keep an eye on. If we go to the next slide, we can focus more on what's happening for Europe, and we will see some countries apart from the Netherlands. We will see France, Germany, and the United Kingdom in there. And if we look at what happened there, it shows the same trend of when there is space to travel. When there is the release of the lockdowns again, and there is opportunity to travel, we do see that that is happening. And interestingly enough, the Netherlands, the small country that we are, we were able to achieve a 41% average occupancy somewhere in the height of the summer season, which again should be a promising sign moving into the spring of 2021. There is, of course, countries in Europe are following each other in the way they handle their restrictions in travel. There are big differences, and I think it is very important to have a look at those markets and see what impact it has on the hotel occupancy. What I do believe to take from the forward-looking data is that Q1, now with all the restrictions in Europe being still firm, this will keep us all locked down, as we know, but we do see some spikes already happening in Q2. And again, let's keep an eye on that and see if that's a real recovery, and the coming weeks will probably prove that to us. If we move to the next slide, it is interesting to look at what effect we have on pickup. It is, again, something that we've not seen before. Pickup usually being much steeper, of course, and being much more, having much longer lead times. What we see now is that the occupancy levels in Q1 are still very low. They are in the single digits, most of mainly, and especially because we're also taking into consideration the bigger cities, like, for example, if we look at the Netherlands, then we see that Amsterdam is also in there with a huge capacity, and the bigger cities are obviously suffering a lot more at this time for the business not being there. The pickup is there, but it's not huge. And if we look at the Q1, it's very unstable due to different lockdowns. What I want to mention is that the base that we see in Q2, which looks kind of positive, especially when you see in June that there's already like a 10%, 9%, 10% base revenue or base occupancy in there. We should really be aware that this could very well be caused by groups that have been moved from 2020 into 2021. So hoteliers out there, go through the books and make sure that that group base that is unsold either materializes, or that you know for sure if it's something that is going to maybe wash, so that you have your numbers right. If we go to the next slide, we can look at what is happening in the Netherlands. We basically see that we are really strongly hit by everything that's going on in Europe, and January is looking particularly bad, as well as Q1. But again, here we see the same signs that Q2 is showing a little bit of recovery, in the sense that there is base business, especially in June. But again, let's keep in mind that this is a lot of group business, as we will see a little later on. If we move on to the next slide, which I think these next two slides are very interesting, and to take away some learnings from. What we've done here is look at, okay, so we know that all the occupancy levels are down. We know that we're all hit. We know that we are all suffering. But what can we do with the numbers that are now there? And what is the impact on, for example, the segments? Well, the way we segmented here is, and I think that mainly you should look at the split between groups and transient travel, is that if you compare the first half of 2020 to December of 2020 and the first half of 2021, that the discount rates, so your promotional rates, have grown quite a bit. They've grown from 42% to 49%. Of course, that's probably very obvious. There are lots of promotions out there now to attract more business. And interestingly enough, the resilience of the retail rate is very high. The segments that were impacted most, of course, is group sold. And we see that the negotiated rates are taking up a smaller portion of the business, which of course is very obvious, as corporate travel is completely down. But it is very important to make sure that you keep focusing on your discount rates and to see what promotions you can put out there. Do keep in mind that before we move on to the next slide, that the unsold block is taking a big share of your of the base business of many hotels moving into the second quarter, which is good to look if it can actually materialize. If we look to the next slide, this one I really like, and I think this is a myself, I have a sales and a marketing background, so when I look at this, I think in opportunities, and it is a good takeaway here to see what is happening, especially with your OTA business and with the business coming through brand.com and, for example, the direct business. There is a big difference between last year, 2020, and what we see happening now in shift in the direct business. So the direct bookings has grown a lot. It is the strongest growing part, and it means that, and we've seen that even now that we are looking at numbers that are not so big, when we saw the same trend in the summer, when there was a spike of bookings for mainly the domestic travel, where a lot of bookings came direct to the hotel, meaning that hotels, our guests, they trust the hotel more than they do the OTAs. They want to connect directly with the hotel to understand, is it safe in your hotel? What are the measures that you are taking to prevent COVID from spreading out in your hotel? What is open and what can I expect? So this is very positive, because it means, to me, looking at it from a marketing point of view, that the importance of communicating directly with your guests through, for example, a CRM system is of vital importance. And knowing your guests and informing them correctly with pre-arrival emails and stuff like that, that's very important. And we also see that the resilience of brand.com, so your own brand website, is very important. So as this proves to be important and grow in importance, and that it's very resilient, then look at your website. What are you showing on there? Is it still up to date? What are you going to do when the market recovers? Are you going to look at ways to set up online marketing campaigns to target the right audience? And this is a great advantage now to finally put some pressure on that big chunk of OTA business that we also always relied on quite a lot, or were fighting against. And it comes down to the mix. But this is definitely something that we believe, being Amadeus as a company, that this will be something that's not a trend, but that will definitely be something that we see more and more, that when travel recovers, that this direct and brand website will be super important for hotels moving forward. If we move on to our next slide, we are going to look at the lead time, because that is, again, if you look at it from a sales and marketing perspective, but also from a revenue management perspective, this is to drive you crazy, because 57% of all bookings happen now within the week of arrival, and this was 35% same time last year. That's an enormous change, and of course we're all aware of that, but it makes that we have to be on top of things, and like looking at the data, we have to constantly monitor what's happening. So if we look at last year, where the window of between 15 and 60 days was when most of the bookings were already on the books and came in, it's now only within the same week, or a couple of days after. Even on the day itself, a lot of bookings are made. That's extremely hard to market for, but it makes it extremely important to keep a close eye on the market data and what are your competitors doing. So that's something to take away, I think. If we move on to our next slide, and then we have a couple of more to go through, and we will share this with you after the event, so you can look at it in more detail. It's also how this lead time is then split up by channel and by segment, as we were just looking at. And it's super, to me, interesting to look at this, analyze it, and see what business materializes when, in order also to know what kind of actions you should take as a hotelier, or maybe not take any action on certain segments at all. So please do have a look at that, and I think there's interesting information for you to take away from that. If we move on to our next slide, then this gives a very interesting view of some key cities that we have in Europe, and it shows their first quarter occupancy levels. So why is this important? Why is it important for you when you're in Amsterdam to know what's happening in Vienna or what's happening in Stockholm? I believe it is very interesting because we are all in the same boat, and that is something that this pandemic has proven, is that it doesn't matter who you're speaking to, someone in China or someone in the US or someone in Stockholm, we are all experiencing the same thing, but it does have different impact on where we live. So if we can see that things are picking up maybe in Vienna, because we know that I'm just making this up, it's not true, but if they would come out of a lockdown sooner and we see things picking up there, or we know that the borders are opening, this could impact where we are in our local markets. So again, we will share this with you and have a look at these big differences that there are also for the first months of the year. If we go to the next slide, I believe that we're almost coming to a close where we can wrap up. Because as I said in the beginning, or at least I think I've said that in the beginning, is that looking at data is not just important at this time, right? So we went through the data now, and we looked at the slides, and we're like, okay, well, I knew that, or wow, that's new to me. But we should not look at it just now and look at these things in slides. The most powerful way of looking at data is to constantly take it up as a part of how you strategize as a hotel, to use historical data to learn from things that happened in the past and to avoid them, or to probably get stronger from that experience, and to look into the future and see what trends are happening there, and to strategize on that, and to know when you should take action and maybe not, to where to spend your money that is probably not as, that's the thing in these times, and know where you should put your money in order to maximize your revenue. So the things that we focus on with Amadeus and our business intelligence platforms is to establish a profitable recovery strategy with comprehensive sources of forward-looking, on-the-books, real-time data that we have available, and then unlock a clear view of how the market is performing during the recovery that is going to happen, and then analyze your expected future performance. And like I said, what makes it even more interesting than just looking at a global impact and the impact on countries as such, is to see and understand what is happening in my direct competitive set. How do I stack up against that competitive set, and how can I empower my own property to differentiate and to stay ahead and to benefit from the things that are happening out there? Of course, and this is what we do, we have our tools available to slice and dice the data in comprehensible and actionable data. So we find and experience that our customer base find it very useful to work with that. Should you be interested in seeing how this would work for your property, then by all means, please contact me through the email address that will be provided by you after this event, and I would be thrilled really to go and have a conversation with you. So please look out also for more market data and insights in our complimentary report that will be shared with you after this event. I'm sure it will be insightful, and I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a lot of good luck and wisdom in wherever you are with your company, with your hotel, and I do look forward to meeting you in person very soon. Thank you all so much.